The Mind Conditions by Venerable Rungruan Papasaro, Dr. Rungruan Lim Chu Patipa. In Buddhism, a person can be good or bad depending on how the mind is processing. A right action is in effect a result from a right mind processing. Therefore we can determine whether a person will do something good or bad by checking the mind condition, whether the mind is wholesome or unwholesome. Theoretically, if we can guide the mind to process into the right pathway, then the mind is wholesome, and whatsoever action taken will be a right speech, a right action, and turning a community to be a right likelihood. Therefore, the ability to monitor the mind condition, so-called mindfulness, is so crucial in life that the mind without mindfulness is considered as a carelessness life with ignorance. And the whole concept of the developed mind in Buddhist practice is to keep on having a mind to be wholesome with mindfulness at all times, to assure that all actions responding to the world are right with goodness at all times. Although originally the mind may be pure and wholesome, but as we all are living in a hostile and dynamic environment, and within just a few seconds when encountering with stimulus from the world, the mind starts to execute the mind processing with ignorance, and contaminated by disinformation within the volitional formations. After then the mind is dominated by various defilements and turning the mind to be unwholesome. Typically this problem will be aggravated until the mind bursts into a wrong action with greed, anger, hatred, and delusion to the world. The difference between wholesomeness and unwholesomeness in terms of the mind conditions can be identified as follows. When the mind is unwholesome, the mind is struggling, internally restless with desire and lust, indicating there is a defilement contaminating the mind. While the unique characteristic of wholesomeness is that the mind will become internally steadied, composed, unified, and concentrated in peace. Therefore, we can have a mindfulness to monitor the mind condition whether it is wholesome or unwholesome, if it is internally steadied, composed, unified, and concentrated or not. The Buddha suggested that we should develop the mind to be wholesome at all times as follows.
I teach you to keep the mind to be wholesome at all times, and whenever the mind is unwholesome, then we should abandon it. This is for the benefit, for the happiness to a person.
The goal of Buddhism is simply to keep the mind to be wholesome at all times, and whenever the mind is unwholesome, then abandoning it. However, since the problem of unwholesomeness with varieties of defilements is very complex, the Buddha explained that the categories of unwholesomeness of mind could be defined in 16 types as follows.
The mind is disturbed by the 16 kinds of unwholesome mind, including greed, ill will, anger, grudge, detraction, domineering, envy, meanness, deceit, hypocrisy, obstinacy, competing contention, conceit, contempt, vanity, and negligence. When the mind is contaminated by these unwholesomeness within the mind processing, it can be compared like having a dirty cloth to be dyed by many dyeing agents of different colors. Definitely, the contaminated mind with unwholesomeness will lead the life to suffering. Therefore, when you are aware of any of these unwholesomeness arising in your mind, you have to abandon it. Then the mind will become gladness, raptured, relaxed, happy, concentrated, then performing an insight for disenchantment and dispassionateness, and then the mind is liberated, and this is a way to make an end of suffering in life. The Brahma who listened to this teachings praises that the Buddha's teachings could be compared like opening a closed vessel, and lightening up a darkened mind for an enlightenment.
In principle, the Buddha's teachings are about the Dharma on how to abandon the unwholesome mind. In Kalama Sutta, the Buddha suggested to abandon unwholesome thoughts as follows.
Then, Kalamas, that noble disciple, devoid of covetousness, devoid of ill will, unconfused, clearly comprehending, ever mindful, he dwells pervading the entire world with a mind imbued with loving kindness, vast, exalted, and measureless, without hostility and without ill will. He dwells pervading the entire world with a mind imbued with compassion, vast, exalted, and measureless, without hostility and without ill will. He dwells pervading the entire world with a mind imbued with altruistic joy, vast, exalted, and measureless, without hostility and without ill will. He dwells pervading the entire world with a mind imbued with equanimity, vast, exalted, and measureless, without hostility and without ill will.
Although it is quite well known that we should have a wholesome mind, not an unwholesome one. This may appear to be simply, and conventionally the unwholesomeness can only be contained not to burst out into wrong action by having a strong regulation and forcibly controlled by meditation power in the Brahman practice. However, this conventional approach can only temporarily contain the problem because the mind is no self, and the mind cannot just become wholesome by force, and only a certain cause must be properly implemented in order to get the result done by wisdom, otherwise a new problem will keep on coming up from an inner mind. The enlightenment of the Buddha is a breakthrough solution to resolve the problem by wisdom. The Buddha introduced an innovative solution approach to totally uproot cleansing of all the problems inside the mind by wisdom, so-called the threefold study strategy. In principle, this threefold study strategy is based on the acknowledged element of mindfulness to activate a cognitive process development. The Dharma of morality can abandon the rough defilements, and the Dharma of the Buddha's teachings about the mind can abandon the lower fetters of the middle defilements, and finally performing an insight observation to gain the Dharma of the wisdom of cognitive process development for the destruction of the taints of the finest defilements. Then the mind is completely purified from all kinds of unwholesomeness, and now the mind is liberated. The systematic Buddhist practice is in fact a way to 3 levels of Dharma studies on the truths of life within nature, starting from the morality, the mind, and the wisdom for the destruction of the taints with the cessations of craving, clinging, and ignorance in the process of dependent origination, which was the insight wisdom that the Buddha gained on the day of his enlightenment. The expected critical achievement from this study, understanding that the mind can be either wholesome or unwholesome. And by having a mindfulness at all times, we can always monitor the mind condition in advance before taking any action to the world.